Before we begin, if you enjoy this kind of content, slow, immersive stories that help you fall asleep, take a moment now to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and if you find it's not for you, you can always unsubscribe later. No pressure at all. Now, let's leave the day behind. Take a deep breath, let the noise of the world fall away like dust from an old velvet curtain. You're here now with the past. If you're listening in the dark, even better. Let the low hum of your fan become the wind off ancient rooftops. Let the warmth of your blanket become the fire of a candlelit chamber. Tonight, we're not reading history. We're stepping into it, quietly, carefully. You're not just hearing a story, you're inside it. So before we begin, take a moment to let your body go heavy. Feel the bed beneath you. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Let your fingers curl loosely. Let your feet fall outward. There's nowhere to be but here. No one to impress. Nothing to do. Just this moment, this breath, this story. Close your eyes if they're not closed already. It's not 20 or 25 anymore. Not here. Let's begin.
The trial was held on a Tuesday. Not that the pig cared. It had been dead for days. But we insisted that justice did not sleep just because the accused did. And so, under a grey sky and the tentative clanging of the village bell, we carried the pig into the square. Not in a wheelbarrow, mind you. That would have been indecent. No, we laid the creature out on a cart draped in linen. A procession of solemn faces followed. The miller, the baker, two boys carrying garlic ropes for spiritual protection. One woman threw lavender, someone else threw bread crusts. None of us could agree if this was a trial or a funeral. It might have been both. At the front of the crowd stood Father Guillaume in full robes, looking as though he hadn't slept in days. He clutched a book older than his bones, the monastic compendium of beastly sins, and muttered prayers not found in any approved liturgy. He was joined by the local magistrate, a man with a lazy eye and no patience for theatrics, who leaned in and whispered, "Let's get this over with," before declaring the courtroom open. The charges were read aloud: trespassing, contamination of holy water, theft of bread, endangerment of livestock, and general malevolence. Someone in the back added, "and murder of the well," which drew a few snorts of approval. A lawyer had come from the next town, a man who'd once defended a cow accused of nudging a bishop. He approached the pig with theatrical seriousness, circled it once, then turned to us. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, as if we were all literate, "we must not confuse tragedy with treachery. A dead pig cannot intend. It cannot choose. We mourn it, but we must not vilify it." The silence that followed was only broken by the wind. And then a sneeze. The prosecution was less polished. A shepherd's wife told us the pig had eaten her soap. A child claimed it stared at him with infernal eyes. Someone else mentioned a rash. After 3 hours of testimony, the magistrate called for a break. Father Guillaume retired to the sacristy to pray. We scattered to our homes for bread and boiled wine, and the pig, well, it remained where it was, draped in linen, unbothered by the cold. When we returned, no new evidence was presented. The magistrate, glancing over his notes, which included the word demonic circled 3 times, sighed and announced the verdict. Guilty. The sentence? Excommunication. Retroactive. The pig would be denied a Christian burial and henceforth listed among the damned. And just like that, we felt better. The water didn't clear, the rash didn't fade, but something about calling the pig guilty made everything feel a little more fair, a little more manageable. As night fell, we removed the linen. We dragged the pig to the woods. No prayers were said, no tomb was marked, but we slept easier. And Father Guillaume, for reasons he couldn't name, added a note to the monastery's great book: one pig, tried and sentenced, found guilty of malice beyond its means. By morning, it was already behind us, but in the records, the trial would remain, a quiet, absurd reminder that justice, once demanded, must always find a shape, even if it's the shape of a pig.
It is the spring of 1796, and the rain in Paris falls like damp ash, slow, grey, unbothered. You wake with a stomach knot tighter than your belt, and a throat still raw from the wine the night before. Not celebration, no, just nerves. Because today you begin work in the residence of the most talked-about general in France. You pull on your boots in the dark, strike flint against the hearthstone, and sip weak coffee while the bread warms over the coals. Out the window the sign glides like old ink through the belly of the city. Bells ring faintly from the cathedral, and carts rattle over wet cobblestones. You smooth your coat and check your breath. You've heard stories. Everyone has. They say he sleeps little, writes often, and commands with a temper like hot lead. Napoleon, Bonaparte, newly married, recently triumphant, and halfway to legend. But in person, that's what you're about to find out. The house sits on the Rue de la Victoire. It is not large, not yet. The plaster peels. The garden is mostly mud, but inside it already feels like the beginning of something. You knock. A steward answers with a yawn and lets you in. "Quiet shoes," he warns. He's writing. The hallway smells of old paper and strong cologne. You hear scratching behind a door, quill on parchment. You do not speak. You wait. Then he enters.
Short, yes, but that's not what you notice first. It's the eyes, sharp, grey, impatient. He looks at you like a problem to be solved, then nods once. That's your welcome. He turns and walks toward his study, coat unbuttoned, hands clasped behind his back. Fresh ink, he mutters to no one. Too much oil in the last batch. You follow the steward into the kitchen, then the scullery. Your job is to assist the household. Fetch letters, polish boots, deliver notes that must never be opened. You are told not to ask questions. You are told he keeps a dagger under his pillow. You laugh, but quietly. By noon, the rain clears, and he's gone. To the Tuileries, they say. Josephine remains. She enters the drawing room in silk slippers and jasmine perfume. Her smile is wide, but thin at the edges. She glances past you. She asks for wine, but when you return, she is staring out the window, one hand to her mouth. You wonder what she's thinking. The maids say she misses her children. They are being raised elsewhere for propriety. Others say she already grows bored of her new husband's intensity. Too much fire, not enough charm. In whispered corners, they call her clever, dangerously so. In the evening, you polish his boots. They're still damp from the street. You notice he walks fast and turns sharply. No wonder the heels wear unevenly. You place the letters he wrote that day into the pouch. One is addressed to Ma Josephine. You hesitate, but the steward coughs, and you seal it. At night, the house grows quieter than you expect. The general eats alone. She does not join him. You hear pacing, always pacing. The servants learn to avoid the corridor outside his study after dusk. He hates interruptions. And when the hour is late and the lamps flicker low, you slip into bed with your thoughts full of paper and boots and the strange space between two people who are supposed to be in love. You do not yet know what's coming, but you have seen enough to wonder if greatness ever leaves room for tenderness. The days begin to stretch. You learn his habits. He rises before the sun and washes with cold water. He sharpens his razors himself. He writes before eating, scribbling fiercely on worn parchment with his back to the window. His coffee is bitter, never sweetened. He doesn't tolerate noise, and when the floorboards creak, he looks up as if the entire republic depends on silence. One morning, you deliver a package. It's from a perfumer, Josephine's favorite, but it's not addressed to her. You raise an eyebrow. The steward shakes his head. Not your concern. Another day, you're asked to burn a bundle of letters. You recognize the handwriting, hers. The steward doesn't explain, and you don't ask. Sometimes you catch whispers. From her maid, from his cook, from the halls where cold draughts carry warm gossip. She visits the theatre more often now, walks in the park without her ring, and once you saw her laughing with a young officer, too brightly, too long. The cook, a stout man with flour on his elbows, mutters, "Paris forgets who it loves," quickly. The laundress swears she saw her slip out after dusk more than once. No one dares tell him. Not yet. Napoleon notices, you think. He grows shorter in speech, longer in silence. He writes more, stays up later. The ink stains on his fingers deepen. He chews the end of his quill. He asks fewer questions, gives sharper commands. You learn to step lightly. You learn to listen between silences. Even the dog avoids him now. Then comes the morning, he snaps. You're bringing tea. He slams a book closed, stands, and says, "Send for my horse. I ride today." "To where, sir?" the steward asks. He doesn't answer. His boots are half-laced. His gloves are inside out. He mounts before the sun is full over the rooftops. That evening he writes 3 letters. You deliver one to Josephine. She doesn't open it at first, just stares. Then slowly she folds shut without reading the second page. Her hands tremble, her face does not. Later, as the fire burns low, the steward says softly, "He never sends just 1 letter when he's wounded. He sends 3. 1 for her, 1 for his brother, 1 for the Minister of War." You nod. The letter felt heavier than paper should. You return to the servants' quarters, your mind filled with footsteps and ink, silence and sighs. You begin to understand what everyone says about him, why even those who hate him cannot forget him. And in the candlelight of that quiet house, you wonder what kind of man writes love like a battle plan and fights wars like their love letters.
By the time summer thickened the air with the scent of roses and horse sweat, the house had changed. It wasn't larger, but it felt heavier, as though secrets soaked the walls, thick as oil paint. You woke earlier now. You had to. The general's moods shifted with the sunrise. Some mornings he'd whistle through the corridors. Others he'd slam the study door before anyone had even lit the kitchen fire. Your hands always smelled of ink now. You ground it fresh, per his instructions, using a method he swore worked best. But you didn't mind. There was something sacred about watching ideas pour from his head through the nib of a quill onto trembling parchment. He never reread what he wrote. He trusted the first cut. He wrote with the ferocity of someone racing against time. Josephine was rarely home. She said she visited her dressmaker, her cousins, the florist. She never said the names, and you never asked. But her maid, Elise, grew quiet around you. That was answer enough. You learned to read silence the way Napoleon read maps. One afternoon,
You carried in a parcel from Milan. Inside, a delicate scarf, perfumed and wrapped in a letter, not addressed to Josephine. You handed it to the steward without a word. He burned it before nightfall. That's how things worked now. Secrets weren't spoken. They were reduced to ash. When Napoleon was home, his presence filled the place. He read the newspaper out loud, criticized it, then read it again. He'd demand the opinions of the house staff on troop formations or politics, then mock the answers with a grin that never reached his eyes. He hated gossip, but he loved control, and that made him restless. He began pacing longer, talking less, writing even more. And sometimes, when he was certain no one watched, he stood before the mirror in the hall, not admiring, studying, as if trying to catch a glimpse of the man history might turn him into. The staff adjusted. We learned to walk softer, to whisper deeper. Elise began staying in the laundry room longer than needed. The steward drank more wine at night. The cook muttered about the days when generals were just soldiers. And you? You kept your head down and eyes open. That's how you survived. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Sunday. The seal cracked like a bone when the steward opened it. Napoleon didn't shout. He just stood still. Too still. The silence held longer than breath. Then he took the letter, folded it into quarters, and placed it in the fireplace, without speaking. The summer passed with a strange stillness. Even the wind seemed to hesitate outside the windows, and within the house everything moved as though under water. Meals were served, boots were polished, linens laundered, but all without urgency. The war might have been a world away, but something else had gone missing closer to home. Josephine no longer asked you to fetch parcels or perfume. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, rehearsing a memory. Sometimes she would stop in a hallway and stare at the wall as if trying to remember what had once hung there. Other times she played cards alone in the drawing room, placing each hand with careful attention, but never finishing the game. You tried not to watch, but she made it hard. Because when someone is falling apart quietly, it's like hearing a song from another room. You don't mean to listen, but you do. Elise began lighting candles earlier in the day, though no one asked her to. She keeps the shadows from thickening, she said. You weren't sure she meant literal shadows. In the kitchen, the cook burned more stews than usual. The steward took to sharpening his quill too often. Everyone was waiting for something, even if they wouldn't admit it.
The year was 1681. The house was Berkeley House in England, where you had just been hired as a new servant. You hadn't even unpacked your second pair of shoes. The floorboards creaked like old bones, and the air inside smelled faintly of lavender and something deeper, like old secrets sealed behind wood panels. You had come from the country, where the only scandal was when the baker's wife fed the priest 2 rolls instead of 1. But here, in this sprawling estate with its ivy-choked chimneys and silver doorknobs, there was already something in the air. You felt it. Not quite danger, but tension, like a thunderstorm on a clear day. Lady Henrietta was the first to greet you, or rather, the first to notice you. She was younger than you'd expected, not more than 17, with bright eyes that made mischief look holy. Her hair was the color of straw in the sun, and her voice carried like a bell even when she whispered. "Don't let my mother catch you lingering," she said, with a smile that wasn't really a smile. You laughed politely, but behind you, someone cleared their throat. Her mother, of course. Lady Elizabeth Berkeley, Countess of Berkeley.
The Countess wore black, though no one had died that week. Her corset looked like it could hold up a cathedral, and she spoke in phrases sharp enough to shave with. "You're the new one," she said, as if she hadn't been the one to hire you. You nodded. She stared a moment longer. "Don't touch the blue porcelain, don't dust the family letters, and never enter the East Wing unless summoned. Is that clear?" You said yes. She turned. "Then don't make me regret you." The East Wing was a mystery even to the other staff. Elise, the scullery maid, said it belonged to Lady Mary Berkeley, the eldest daughter, and her husband, Ford Grey, the 1st Earl of Tankerville, better known as Lord Grey of Wark. But no one had seen them yet. They were away, or perhaps not. Elise said sometimes you could hear footsteps there late at night, not boots, bare feet, running. You didn't believe her. Not then. You kept your head down and apron tied. The servants moved like ghosts in the corridors, and the portraits watched you with eyes that seemed far too modern for their powdered wigs. But it was Lady Henrietta who kept your attention. She was always in motion, laughing too loudly at nothing, disappearing during morning tea. Once you caught her pressing a folded paper to her lips before slipping it into the bust of a marble statue. You said nothing, because something in her face warned you not to. On the 4th day, Lord Grey arrived. It was unannounced. Carriage wheels over gravel, horses snorting, a flurry of motion at the door. You peered from the stairwell. He stepped out cloaked in navy and shadow, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, hair curled just so. When he turned, you understood everything. Why the servants paused, why Lady Henrietta had stopped mid-step at the top of the stairs. His eyes scanned the house slowly, not searching, possessing. And when his gaze found Henrietta, he smiled, only slightly, but it was enough. Dinner that night felt like theatre. The Countess sat stiff, fingers clutching her wineglass. Lord Berkeley coughed more than usual. Henrietta said little, but Lady Mary, the rightful Lady Grey, spoke often, too often, laughing a half-second too loud, tapping her fork just once too many times. And Lord Grey? He cut his meat slowly, deliberately, as if each movement said, "I am here. Watch me." Later, while tending the hallway candles, you passed by the drawing room. Light spilled beneath the door. Voices murmured. A girl, a man. You leaned closer, not close enough to hear words, only tones, urgent, then soft, then something that might have been a sigh. The door.
It is the year 1348. The sky over Marseille is grey and heavy, the kind that never breaks into storm, just hangs there like a wool blanket over the world. You wake up in your lodgings above the apothecary's shop, your throat full of ash and vinegar. The cloth inside your beak mask is damp from yesterday's tincture, and the scent of crushed rosemary and wormwood clings to your face like regret. You don't know it yet, but by the end of this week, half the alley you live on will be gone. You light a candle, though it's already morning. The sun barely filters in through the soot-coated window. It's your first official day as a plague doctor, though you've seen the signs creeping in for months. First, a grocer, then a boy with bleeding gums, then 3 monks who died in silence. Yesterday, the city posted notices. All persons sick of fever must remain within their homes. Plague doctors to collect dead at dawn and sundown. You have a small bag of coins from the bishop and a longer list of names to check today. But your real payment, they told you, will be recorded in heaven. You are not sure you believe in heaven anymore. You walk through the courtyard, your long, dark robes brushing the stone. The birds have stopped singing. Someone has painted a red X on the tannery wall. You smell the salt and rotting hides before you reach the gates, and then there's a girl crying under the olive tree, her hands bloodied, her feet bare. She won't look at you. No one does, once they see the mask. Your first call is to the merchant's home by the docks. You've never met him, but everyone knows his house by the sound, the constant wheezing cough of his wife. You knock. No answer. When you push the door open, a cat scurries out. The smell hits next, like burnt sugar and rot. The merchant is slumped in the corner, unmoving. His wife is still alive, but her eyes are rolled back, and a line of black pus drips from her ear. She murmurs a name. You can't tell if it's his or yours. You do what you've been trained to do. You anoint her with oil. You tie rosemary to her bedpost. You read a psalm over her belly. Then you take a charcoal stick and mark the door. 1 down, 14 to go. That's just today. And so it begins. The next stop is worse. A midwife's cottage tucked beneath the northern watchtower. She had helped birth half the children in the quarter. You remember her laugh, bright and coarse, like gravel in a stream. Now she lies curled in her own sheets, the skin beneath her fingernails dark and weeping. Her husband will not let go of her hand. You ask him to leave. He will not. So you kneel beside her and work anyway. She breathes as if her lungs are stuffed with cotton. You recognize the signs, buboes rising beneath her arms, her pulse fast but distant. The husband kisses her temple, whispers something about the feast of St. Agnes. You pretend not to hear. You finish the rites and offer him one of the blessed wafers. He does not take it. By midday, your mask smells only of fear. You have seen 6 houses, left 6 marks. At the butcher's gate, a dog snarls at your ankles. You do not flinch. A boy peeks from the window above and draws a cross in the air. He is no older than 7. That is the age your brother was when the coughing took him. You remember the look on your mother's face, the same look they give you now. Not pity, not hatred. Something in between. You try not to drink the wine too early, but you sip by the city's old fountain where water once ran clear. Now it carries the stink of rotted fruit and salt. A priest walks past, blessing no one. You wonder if he is afraid of you or just tired of pretending. You move west, toward the hill, richer homes, gilded doorknobs, rose gardens untouched. But plague knows no class. Behind the 4th door, a noblewoman clutches her dead infant. Her maid has locked herself in the pantry, refusing to come out. The baby is still warm. You take it gently. You say the prayer twice. The woman begins to scream. You let her. There is no reason not to. As the sun dips, Marseille becomes a ghost town. Doors shuttered, flags hanging limp. You count the names left. 2 more. One is a widow who lives beside the bell tower. She is already gone. You find her in bed, eyes open, flies humming. A silver comb lies on her chest. Her cat meows from beneath the cot. You leave the window open in case her soul is slow to rise. The last house is your own. You knock on your own door and feel a strange detachment. It is only when you see the slip of paper nailed beside it that your knees weaken. Evicted. Suspected exposure. You are not allowed back inside. You lean against the gate. The sky darkens. You hear a cough that might be your own. The city will not remember your name. But tonight you are still alive. And tomorrow you begin again. It is morning again, though the sky suggests otherwise. A light mist clings to the ground as if reluctant to lift, and your joints creak from sleeping in the vestry. You'd asked Father Oral to let you stay, and he had, reluctantly. Now he's already gone, leaving the chapel empty except for the statue of Saint Sebastian, whose arrow-pierced chest glares down from the altar as if to say, "You chose this." You re-wrap your sleeves, adjust the mask, and dip the linen inside it into a fresh mix of vinegar, sage, and crushed rose petals. The bishop's apothecary sent a letter claiming rose masks saved 4 nuns in Avignon. You doubt the story, but the smell is better than death. You adjust your pouch. 7 names today. That is 3 fewer than yesterday. Progress? Or simply fewer people left to call upon? The first house is open. No one inside. A trail of ash leads from the hearth to the front door, as if someone tried to burn their way out of illness. On the wall, a prayer is scrawled in charcoal. "Lord, forgive our lungs." You walk further east where the plague hit last. These streets still hum with denial. People sweep stoops, hang herbs, paint protective symbols. A boy runs past you with a copper bell tied to his ankle, so the sickness hears him coming and flees, his mother says from the steps. You nod. You do not correct her. The weaver's family is next. 8 of them, crammed into one stone room. You count 3 dead already. 2 more look close. One daughter, maybe 10, holds a pot of elderflower tea. She tries to give it to her father, but his lips are cracked and bleeding. You give her oil, a wafer, a rag soaked in wine. She takes it like it means everything. You hope it does. Down the lane, you stop at the baker's, not to check a name, to sit, to breathe. He offers a crust of bread, wrapped in old cloth. It tastes like dust. Still, you chew slowly, thankful. He says nothing as he passes you a flask of warm cider. You drink, feeling it cut through the vinegar in your mouth. The silence between you is the most human thing you've felt in days. Next, the guildmaster's wife. She never liked doctors. "Plague follows them like fleas," she once said at the festival. Now her husband is dead. She clutches her rosary and glares at your boots. You ask her to step aside. She does not. So you mark the threshold and leave her to her grief. A cough behind you. A boy with ink-stained fingers. He holds out a letter. You take it. It's addressed to no one. Inside. "They are dying faster than I can write. Please don't let them be forgotten." You keep walking, and the mist does not lift. The afternoon brings more names. You follow them like a liturgy, one threshold to the next. Most doors don't open. You scratch a mark into the wood, a warning to others. If they're still alive, they're choosing silence, or they've sealed the doors from the inside. You reach the tanner's lane by dusk. The smell here is always foul, but now it carries something sweeter beneath it. Decay. You knock once. No reply. You push the door. It groans open. Inside, 3 children lie side by side under a makeshift blanket. No adults. Just a crude note pinned to the table. "We went to find help. Tell them not to drink the river water." You write their names on your ledger. You hope they are real names. You give the children wine-soaked cloth. Say a prayer. Leave bread from your pouch beside them. You do not know if they will live, but you must leave them. You always must. Back on the street, someone has drawn angels in chalk beside the well. One has no face, just hollow circles where eyes should be. You look away too quickly. The last visit of the day takes you to the edge of town. A small hut, barely a room. A woman meets you at the door. She's older than most, but her voice is firm. She does not cry. She does not panic. She shows you the child on the straw bed inside, explains the fever came fast. You examine her. The girl is quiet, blinking slowly. Her pulse is light, but steady. You give them everything you can spare. Before you leave, the woman puts a hand on your arm. "You're not God," she says. "Just be a good man." You nod, but you don't answer. Because outside, under the grey sky, you begin to doubt you're either. The wind that morning comes from the south, warm, humid, and filled with the scent of tilled fields. It should be comforting. Instead, it smells like rot dressed as spring. You wake on the chapel floor, your mask hanging above you like a vulture. In the half-dark, you mistake it for a man's face. Your heart thunders until your mind catches up. You dress slowly, your wrists ache. You stretch your fingers one by one before fitting the gloves. The linen is damp again, always damp. You used to dry them before each day began. Now, there's no time. Your first visit is to a home near the southern wall. You haven't been there before. The door swings open before you knock. A young man waits, barefoot, shaking. "She's in the back," he says. His hands don't stop moving. Just look." The girl inside is his sister, 14 maybe. She's burning with fever, but no buboes yet. She grips the sheets and speaks nonsense about fire in her veins. You give him instructions, leave medicine, water, wine. He doesn't ask questions. He only nods. As you leave, he says, "Will you come back?" You don't answer. You rarely do. Mid-morning, you pass the square. A man is preaching atop a barrel. His voice is cracked, but his words sharp. "The Lord smites the proud. He opens the earth to swallow the wicked." The crowd below him is small. Some listen. Some mutter. One throws a turnip. You keep walking. At the apothecary's corner, someone has left a basket of roots with a note, "To spare the healer the trouble." You pocket a few sprigs of mint and yarrow, useful for breath, for belly, for morale. A woman in red calls to you from her window. Her husband is coughing. "He's hidden in the cellar," she says. "The neighbors mustn't know." You descend the stairs. The air is thick and damp. He lies on a bed of hay, delirious, eyes sunken. She follows behind, weeping. "I married him for his strong arms," she says. "Now he cannot even lift a spoon." You leave a wax cloth soaked in vinegar and elder. She clutches it like it's gold. Outside, the bells toll. Once, twice. Then silence. You count each breath until your thoughts are quiet again. There's a cart being pulled toward the edge of town. It creaks with every bump. The driver doesn't look back. You recognize one of the hands hanging from the edge, a woman who gave you carrots last week. You had promised her they might help. You try not to look too long. By evening, the clouds settle low, rain falls, not enough to clean, only enough to smear. You sit on the chapel steps, your back to the door. The world smells like vinegar and damp stone. Father Oral lights candles inside. You see his shadow pass and pause. He brings you bread. It is still warm. You eat slowly, and you do not speak. It begins with a knock, 3 soft raps against the chapel door. You open it to find no one, just a wrapped bundle on the steps. Inside, a note, a ring, and a braid of hair. The note reads, "For when she wakes, if she ever does, tell her he waited." You keep the braid in your pouch, just in case. The ring you leave on the altar. Someone will know what it means. You tell yourself that. The day is heavier than most. The mist is gone, replaced by still air that feels wrong on your skin. You walk north today, toward the fields beyond the hill. Fewer homes there, but the sickness travels with the wind. A farmer's widow waits at her gate. Her children are behind her, pale and squinting. "Is it true," she asks, "that it came from the east? From ships?" You nod. Then shake your head. Truth is more complex than any one story. She offers you eggs. You decline, but she insists. "They were my husband's hens," she says. "They're still laying, poor things." You place them carefully in your bag, already imagining to whom you might give them. In the next house you find only a dog, curled beside a small bed. A girl lies in it, unmoving. The dog growls once, then whimpers. You kneel, feel for warmth. She's gone. You wrap her gently, take the crucifix from her hand, and place it around the dog's neck. You don't know why. It just feels right. At midday, you rest beside the stream. The water level is low. The sun makes it shimmer like it might be clean. You almost believe it. A rider passes on the hill, noble colors, probably a courier. You wonder if he carries news of peace or plague. They travel just as swiftly. You hear music later, a fiddle, faint and stumbling. You follow the sound and find two boys and a girl dancing in a clearing. No audience, no shoes, just laughter. When they see you, they stop. The girl curtsies. "For the saints," she says. You nod. You do not tell her there is no saint for this. The tanner's apprentice finds you near dusk. He's breathing hard, sweating through his sleeves. "Master's not well," he says he's cursed. You follow him. The shop stinks of old hides and fear. The man sits on a stool, shirtless, his skin marked with sores. He laughs when he sees you. "Finally," he says, "bring the bell. Let them know it's done." You treat what you can. Clean the wounds. Wrap the cloths. The apprentice watches with wide eyes. You tell him to boil everything, twice, then again. He nods. Outside, the moon is rising, pale and wide. You sit again on the chapel steps, one hand on your pouch. The braid is still there. You wonder if the girl has woken. You wonder how many more will leave tokens like that. You wonder if someone will one day leave something for you. But you do not dwell. You write the names. You mark the map. You light your lantern. Tomorrow waits, and so do the dying. The sky is the color of wet parchment when you rise. A thin light filters through the chapel window, and for the first time in days you think the air smells less foul, not clean, but less soaked in grief. You stretch your back, listen to the crack of your spine, and sit for a moment before donning the mask. Each morning feels heavier. Your hands tremble now when you fasten the beak, not from fear, but from fatigue that no prayer or potion touches. You step outside and are met by silence. The birds are quiet. Even the flies seem still. The world holds its breath. A cart passes the square, empty save for the priest walking beside it. He carries no bell today, just a sack of lime. Your first visit is unexpected. A child knocks on your chapel door just as you're lacing your boots. "My mother," she says, and nothing more. Her dress is too small and one eye is swollen. You follow her across the field to a stone hut you didn't know existed. Inside, the woman coughs blood into her apron. You see the fear behind her smile. You give her dried rosehip and water and speak softly. When you leave, the girl asks if you'll stay. "I have others," you say. But her hand lingers on yours before she lets go. Later, you're called to the baker's shop. Not for the baker, but his flour boy. He's collapsed near the ovens, soaked in sweat and stammering. The heat masks the stench of infection until you touch his chest. Scolding, you carry him into the alley where he can breathe cooler air. The baker insists you take bread as thanks. You do, but give it to the next widow you pass. The graveyard is full. A priest blesses the earth without looking at it. He reads from a book that no longer feels holy. A boy with no shoes tosses handfuls of dirt over a sheet-covered body. No one cries anymore. They are cried out. At midday, you return to the well near the market. A woman is scrubbing a copper pot and singing. You think her mad at first, until you realize she's just trying to pretend. You sit near her and listen. She offers you wine from a flask. You sip. It burns, but it helps. In the afternoon, you check on the girl with the braid. She's awake, pale, thin, but awake. Her brother weeps when he sees you. "I didn't think," he begins, but you hold up your hand. "She'll need broth," you say, "and patience." He nods as if you've offered him a kingdom. You pause at the chapel that evening. Father Oral is in prayer. You sit beside him, still masked. He says nothing but places a warm stone in your palm. "From the hearth," he whispers, so you remember warmth still exists. You sleep lightly. Dreams come fast. Faces, names, doors you didn't open in time. When you wake, your eyes are wet. But the mask waits, and so do they. You see it rising from the chapel steps, dark smoke curling above the rooftops like a banner of surrender. No bells are rung, no cries call out, but you know the sound of chaos by now, and it is always quietest at the beginning. You walk quickly, your bag heavier than usual, your feet skimming the frost-bitten ground. By the time you reach the fire, a crowd has gathered. Faces you know. Shoemaker, flax weaver, the tall boy who once asked you how many people a soul could carry. All are watching the baker's shop burn. Someone says the ovens sparked it. Someone else swears they saw rats with candles in their mouths. No one moves to help. There is nothing to save. The baker is gone. The flower boy, too. You wonder if it's mercy or coincidence. A woman spits on the ground. "Even the bread is cursed now," she mutters. You turn away. In the square, someone's tied red cloth to the well pump. A silent warning. Do not drink. You nod once, grateful for the small mercy of a sign. The sick will come anyway. But at least they've been warned. You test the air. The wind is shifting east. By midday, your hands shake again. The tinctures are running low. You spend 2 hours boiling rosemary and onion, muttering prayers you no longer believe. The herbs steam against your mask. You try not to cough. Every tickle in the throat feels like a sentence. You visit the blacksmith next. He greets you with a joke, something about how you always look like you're about to steal his soul. You smile behind your mask. He's sweating, coughing. Still swings the hammer. You tell him to rest. He says he'll sleep when his forge cools. You leave a packet of sage on his bench. That afternoon, a merchant caravan rolls into the village. You hear the wheels long before you see them. Bright canopies, masked faces, and a bell that rings not for death, but for trade. One woman offers you lemon peel for a story. You tell her about the girl who lived. She cries, then gives you 2 peels instead. A boy in the caravan has a fever. They ask if it's the plague. You check the swellings. No buboes, no black spots. Likely fever from the road. Still, you tell them to move on before dusk. It is safer. For them. For you. That night, a note is pinned to the chapel door, written in red ink. No signature. It reads, "Stop naming the dead. Let them sleep." You keep the note, burn the edges, hide it in your pouch. That night, you do not sleep. You sit by the hearthstone and count your own breaths and wonder if someday someone will name you. You close your eyes and listen for footsteps that do not come. The wind is cruel this morning, slapping the shutters against stone, rattling the doors of those too weak to rise. You wake to find your mask frozen at the edges, a rim of frost at the beak where your breath gathered in sleep. It is January now. You had almost forgotten. The calendar means nothing here. Only the names do, and the ones you haven't yet written. A child waits by the gate when you step outside, barefoot, unblinking, holding a wilted rose. "They said you help people," she says. You ask who they are, but she just looks down the road. You follow. The cottage is collapsing in on itself. The thatch has caved in. A fire still burns in the hearth, but the rest of the house is silent. Inside, a woman lies curled on a straw pallet, muttering names, too fast, too soft to catch. The child kneels beside her, lips moving in silent prayer. You check her pulse. Weak, but present. You whisper that she might live. You do not add the odds. You stay an hour. You make a poultice, rinse a cloth, leave behind a sliver of hope in a bundle of time. When you leave, the child hugs you without asking. You do not stop her. On the way back, you pass the bell tower. 2 crows perch near the rope. Watching, waiting. You do not ring it. Not today. Enough death already calls without invitation. At the edge of town, a man has hung a signboard from his door. Not sick, not dead, just drunk. You laugh for the first time in weeks. Then knock. He opens the door holding a flask. Want some? You decline. But you stay a moment longer than usual, just to feel the warmth of a life not yet cracked by grief. By midday, the monks arrive. 4 of them, hoods pulled low, chanting as they walk. They claim to have relics, bones of a saint said to cure pestilence. They demand entry to the church. Father Guillaume protests, but they cross the threshold anyway. You follow them, quietly. They place the bones on the altar, recite prayers, sprinkle water that smells of rose oil. One begins to convulse, another screams, the congregation panics. In the confusion, you notice a 5th monk by the door, not praying, watching. When you step toward him, he vanishes into the shadows. That night, a fever takes the innkeeper. You find him wrapped in quilts, sweat glistening on his brow. He begs you to write a letter. "To my daughter," he whispers. "She's in Calais. Tell her I remember her hair, like fire." You write it, leave it folded beneath his pillow. He does not survive till dawn. You bury him behind the stable. No one else came. You spend the morning walking the perimeter of the village. Your boots sink in frostbitten mud. The trees are bare now, their limbs like reaching arms. You feel the silence more than ever, like the land itself holds its breath. At sunset, you return to the chapel. You do not speak. You simply write the names and light the lantern again. The sky is yellow-gray this morning. No sun, just the color of old parchment, like a letter from a time before everything broke. You leave before the bell tolls. Your hands ache from cold and ink, but there are still names to find, still streets to walk. The first door is open. The house smells of vinegar and broth. A boy sits on the floor, wrapping his mother's feet in rags. She moans softly. You kneel beside them. She's burning up. You offer a tonic, then ask the boy how long. 3 days, he says. She stopped knowing my name yesterday. You do what you can. Her breath rattles, her limbs twitch. You leave a sprig of lavender on the windowsill. The boy takes your hand. If she dies, will she remember me? You lie. Yes. You pass the bakery next. It hasn't reopened, not since the miller died, but someone has lit a candle inside. You enter quietly. Flour dust still clings to everything. In the back room, a young woman kneels beside an oven. Her apron is clean. Her eyes are red. I'm just waiting for the dough to rise, she says. You don't correct her. Instead, you sit with her in silence until she forgets you're there. Outside, the snow begins, fat flakes that melt too quickly. The sky weeps slowly today. By noon, your cloak is soaked. You visit the midwife's home. No answer. You let yourself in. She's sitting at the table, upright, frozen in prayer. Her rosary slips from her fingers as you approach. You close her eyes. They were kind. A courier gallops past you on the main road. His horse kicks mud across your mask. He doesn't look back. You wonder what news he carries. Peace, war, or worse, silence, the kind that fills churches after the bells stop. Near the village edge, a line of carts is forming. Not for goods, for bodies. An edict has come from the nearest city. Burn the infected, bury the rest. No exceptions. The undertaker weeps as he loads them. Some were still warm, he whispers. You nod. You've heard it before. You spend the next hours gathering what you can. Names, prayers, bits of bread, a comb, a torn shoe. Every object feels sacred now. Every corner of the village a chapel. The people speak less. They look longer, like they're trying to memorize each other. By twilight a fire is lit at the far field. Smoke curls into the air. Dark, bitter smoke. You stand far back, but the smell finds you. It always does. You light your lantern anyway. Someone must see it. You return to the chapel. The braid is still in your pouch. The map has grown crowded with marks. The ink is running low. Father Guillaume kneels by the altar. He does not rise when you enter. He is weeping. There are no saints left, he says. You place a hand on his shoulder. Then we must become them, you whisper. You sit. You write. You fold the letters for those who won't return. You do not know if the plague will end. You do not know if history will remember. But you were here. You saw them. And tonight they will not go unnamed. It is the year 1673, and you've just arrived at your cousin's home in the Yorkshire countryside. The journey took all day. Now the sun is slipping behind the hills like it too is tired. Your feet ache, your bones rattle, the wind nips at your ears, and when you step down from the cart, the frozen grass crunches beneath your boots like old parchment. You've never been this far north. You've never seen a sky so wide. A maid takes your bag, and your cousin Edmund claps you on the back as if you'd just returned from war. Inside, the house smells of beeswax and barley. Firewood crackles in every hearth, and tapestries hang thick from the walls, keeping the chill out. You're ushered to supper before you can even change your stockings. Mutton stew, thick bread, apple cider with too many cloves. Your aunt says the cold preserves the apples better. Your uncle mutters something about frost warding off flies. You sit between the twins, neither of whom speaks more than 5 words the entire meal. Their dog snores beneath the table. By 8, the candles are low. The fire is fed again. You're shown to a guest room at the top of the stairs, where the ceiling slopes and the floorboards creak beneath every step. You change clothes by candlelight, pull on a nightshirt, slide into bed. You try not to think too much, just rest. But rest does not come. You don't know how long you sleep. The window's gone silver with frost when your eyes open again. A soft sound, movement. You hold your breath. Down the hall someone walks, a door opens, laughter, a kettle hisses, not a dream. You sit up, listen, then wrap yourself in your cloak and step quietly out into the corridor. The household is awake. You pass the kitchen. Your aunt is there, stoking the fire. Your uncle sits reading by a single candle, boots still on. One of the twins walks past you carrying a plate of bread and cheese. No one seems alarmed. No one asks why you're out of bed. It's just past midnight, and the house is alive. They call it the waking. You hear the term whispered in the stairwell, in the kitchen, in the soft hush of a shared hallway candle. This isn't unusual. It's the in-between. First sleep, then wake, then second sleep. You're the only one who seems surprised by it. Back in bed an hour later, you lie staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what your mother told you about peasants and stars and old customs. But you remember nothing useful. only this: you are the outsider here, and tonight time itself has split in two. The next night you pretend to be asleep, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. You want to see if it happens again, the stirring, the quiet rustle of feet against floorboards, the kettle singing when it shouldn't. And it does, right on time. A little after midnight, your door creaks, and faint light pours beneath it. Someone coughs gently down the hall. You slip from bed. You pass the library this time. Edmund is inside, reading. Not something for school or study, but a poem. Something about a hunter and the moon. He's mouthing the words. Doesn't notice you watching. In the kitchen, your aunt is kneading dough. "Bread for second breakfast," she says without looking up. "It rises better this hour." Your uncle, in his chair again, is darning socks. When he sees you, he offers you a needle. You decline. You walk the hallway, see the household in slow motion. There's no rush, no one yawns. The dog is awake too, wandering between rooms like it's part of the ritual. You wonder how long this has been their way. Weeks? Years? Generations? Your cousin Anna appears beside you, hair braided down her back. "They say the soul wanders at night," she says softly, "and comes back just before morning." "What happens if it doesn't?" you ask. She shrugs. "Then it finds someone else's body to borrow." You don't sleep easily after that. By the third night, it's no longer strange, it's expected. You begin to feel the rhythm of it, the deep sleep, the wakeful hour, the drift into dreams again. You keep a candle beside your bed now. You rise when they do. And in that quiet hour, something shifts inside you, as if your thoughts too need space to stretch before dawn. You read. You write a little. You peel apples. You mend a button. You sit once with your aunt and drink cider that bites the tongue. She says this was once how monks timed their prayers. You nod, though you're not sure how prayer fits into the midnight silence. There are rules here, unwritten. Don't wake those who stay asleep. Don't ask why the bells chime once at 1 o'clock. Don't sit in the blue chair by the attic door. That last one you only learn by mistake. By the fourth night, you forget there was ever a time you didn't wake. It becomes part of you, like blinking, like breathing. No longer strange, just quiet. Expected. Even your dreams seem to adjust. They come in fragments now, like paper torn too neatly, one half before waking, the other stitched on after. Your uncle has taken to telling stories in the waking hour. Only then. Never at breakfast. Never during chores. Always in that strange stillness between midnight and 2. Tales of ghosts. A cow that refused to die. A girl who woke each night to find her braid undone. He laughs at himself, says none of it is true, but when he speaks, he never looks at the fire. Only the window. Anna stays up longer now. You often find her on the stairs staring out at the yard. She tells you she dreams of people who speak in backwards Latin. That last night, she saw someone enter the orchard who had no feet. You say nothing. What's there to say? You haven't seen anything, but you've started hearing things. And not in dreams, in the in-between. One night you pass the attic door and hear a voice say your name. It is not a voice you recognize. You open the door, slowly. Inside, dust, boxes, the blue chair. No one there. But something, a draft, a shiver, pushes past you as you close it. Later, at the hearth, your aunt says the waking hour is not just for bread and prayers. It's when the house remembers, she whispers. Memories fall loose, like fruit. That's why you stay quiet. If you speak too loud, something might answer. You want to laugh, but you don't, because something did answer. The next evening you try staying asleep. You force your eyes closed, wrap the pillow around your head, but your body betrays you. At 12:15, you wake, sweating. Something is wrong. The air smells sour, as if the apples went off in the night, as if something beneath the house has turned. You sit up. The candle won't light. You hear footsteps, but none pass your door. Downstairs, nothing stirs. The hearth is cold, the kettle dry, the hall empty. You are alone in the waking hour, and you feel watched. It is the year 411 BCE, and you are standing in the morning sun of Athens, regretting your decision to wake up. Not because of the sun, although it's already too bright, but because today is laundry day, and in your cousin's home, laundry means one thing: the amphora of warm, weeks-old human urine is coming out of the shed. You didn't know that when you agreed to help. You just needed a place to stay, a roof, a meal, a job that didn't involve military drills or public flogging. But now you're here, holding a basket of tunics that reek of goat and man, staring at your cousin's smug grin as he lifts the lid from the clay jar. The smell hits you first, sharp, tangy, ancient, like vinegar and something that once lived. He says it's the best batch yet. You try not to vomit. Everyone in Athens does it, he tells you, even the temples, especially the temples. The ammonia in the urine, he says, lifts stains and restores white linen like nothing else. The wealthy even pay for chamber pots to be emptied into private jugs, aged just long enough to bubble. You blink at him. He shrugs. It's not waste, it's wisdom. You kneel beside the stone basin, pour the cloudy liquid over the tunics. Your hands sting, your nose weeps, but the stains begin to lift. Sores from the battlefield, oil from the gymnasium, wine from last week's symposium. It works. You hate that it works. And then, like some sick joke, your cousin starts humming. A cheerful little tune from the festival of Dionysus. A song about rivers and rebirth. He says you'll get used to it, that your hands will stop stinging after the second week, that the sharp scent will dull into something like pride. You doubt it. By afternoon, the clothes are strung between fig trees. You sit in the shade, fingers raw, wondering what else this city uses urine for. A neighbor walks by and greets you with a nod, his teeth shining strangely white. You ask. He grins. Mouth rinse, he says. You suddenly remember your cousin offering you a cup earlier that morning. You said no. Thank all the gods. By evening you've soaked tunics, scrubbed sandals, and polished a bronze comb, all with the same liquid. Your arms ache, your pride is gone, but the clothes gleam. You lie awake on your cot that night, staring at the cracked ceiling. Somewhere in the house, another pot is collecting the next batch. You wonder if Athena herself would have approved, or if she's laughing. It is the year 411 BCE, and you are standing in the morning sun of Athens, regretting your decision to wake up. Not because of the sun, although it's already too bright, but because today is laundry day. And in your cousin's home, laundry means one thing: the amphora of warm, weeks-old human urine is coming out of the shed. You didn't know that when you agreed to help. You just needed a place to stay. A roof, a meal, a job that didn't involve military drills or public flogging. But now you're here, holding a basket of tunics that reek of goat and man, staring at your cousin's smug grin as he lifts the lid from the clay jar. The smell hits you first, sharp, tangy, ancient, like vinegar and something that once lived. He says it's the best batch yet. You try not to vomit. Everyone in Athens does it, he tells you, even the temples, especially the temples. The ammonia in the urine, he says, lifts stains and restores white linen like nothing else. The wealthy even pay for chamber pots to be emptied into private jugs, aged just long enough to bubble. You blink at him. He shrugs. It's not waste, it's wisdom. You kneel beside the stone basin, pour the cloudy liquid over the tunics. Your hands sting, your nose weeps, but the stains begin to lift. Sores from the battlefield, oil from the gymnasium, wine from last week's symposium. It works. You hate that it works. And then, like some sick joke, your cousin starts humming, a cheerful little tune from the Festival of Dionysus, a song about rivers and rebirth. He says you'll get used to it, that your hands will stop stinging after the second week, that the sharp scent will dull into something like pride. You doubt it. By afternoon, the clothes are strung between fig trees. You sit in the shade, fingers raw, wondering what else this city uses urine for. A neighbor walks by and greets you with a nod, his teeth shining strangely white. You ask. He grins. Mouth rinse, he says. You suddenly remember your cousin offering you a cup earlier that morning. You said no. Thank all the gods. By evening, you've soaked tunics, scrubbed sandals, and polished a bronze comb, all with the same liquid. Your arms ache. Your pride is gone. But the clothes gleam. You lie awake on your cot that night, staring at the cracked ceiling. Somewhere in the house, another pot is collecting the next batch. You wonder if Athena herself would have approved, or if she's laughing. You were there when the Greeks cleaned everything with urine, Part 2. The next morning, you are greeted by a new smell. This one is floral, sweet, and completely wrong for the source. Your cousin waves you over to the courtyard, where a woman in a saffron robe stands beside a vat of crushed herbs and more urine. This, she says, is perfume. You hesitate. She insists. Lavender, myrrh, a dash of goat milk, and aged male urine. It's not for the body, she clarifies, at least not at first. It's for cloth, masks, even temple offerings. The scent clings longer than water-based oils, and once the ammonia fades, the floral notes linger like prayers in a marble hall. You try not to gag as she rubs a bit behind your ear. Your cousin nods as if this is normal, because it is. Later that day, you're sent to the tanners. Leather, they say, is nothing without the bite of urine. You watch workers stomp barefoot in vats of yellowish liquid and goat hides. They chat. They laugh. Their legs are stained. They say the acid softens the leather. It's what separates our sandals from the barbarians, one man jokes. You stop making eye contact. Back home, your cousin reveals that chamber pots are taxed in some cities. He seems proud. Because they're valuable, he says. Like bronze or oil, you can't run a house without them. You believe him now, and that disturbs you. That night, you sit beneath an olive tree trying to clear your head. A breeze stirs. You smell jasmine. And something else. Your cousin plops beside you and says, the philosophers have debated the merits of using waste for decades. Isn't it clever, he asks, that we take what the gods discard and make it useful? You shrug. You're not sure if it's clever or just disturbing. Before bed, your cousin brushes his teeth. With what, you don't ask. And in the middle of the night, you hear him mumbling to himself, repeating an old phrase from his father, purity from impurity. You wonder if he's right, or if Athens is losing its mind. 2 days later, you are handed a fresh tunic and a sealed letter. Your cousin has arranged something. The temple needs a helper, he says, biting into a fig. They want someone with a strong stomach. You narrow your eyes. He winks. You already regret everything. At the temple of Apollo, you are greeted by a priestess who smells of lemons and smoke. She leads you through the colonnades to a rear chamber where statues line the walls, golden-eyed gods with frozen smiles. A young boy sweeps the marble floor. The priestess hands you a cloth and points to a basin. You peer in. Urine. Again. Sacred cleaning, she explains. Diluted with rosewater and fennel, of course. It purifies. The scent is fleeting. The purpose is not. So you begin. Dionysus's sandals, Artemis's quiver, even Apollo's lyre gets a careful wipe. The priestess nods approvingly as you work. People bring dust with them, she says. Thoughts, greed. This keeps the space clear. You aren't sure if she's serious or if she enjoys watching newcomers squirm. Either way, the statues gleam. At midday, you're given olives and wine, not watered, not fouled, just wine. The priestess speaks of purity, of balance, of how cities rot when they forget their rituals. You nod politely while massaging your raw fingers. Then she mentions a new use, parchment. Apparently, before scribes ink their letters, the pages are lightly rinsed. To soften, to whiten, to repel mold. You blink slowly. Does it work? You ask. She raises a brow. You're holding a scroll, aren't you? You are. By the time you return home, your cousin has drawn a bath. You are suspicious, rightly so. The water smells faintly acrid. I added a touch, he admits. Your skin will glow. You dive out of the tub. He laughs for 5 minutes. That night, you dream of rivers, yellow rivers, flowing through marbled courtyards. And somewhere in the dream, Athena is smiling, possibly at your expense.
It is the year 1352, and the sun above the Sahel is not the kind that merely warms, it rules. It bears down with a weight that bends the backs of goats and dries riverbeds into cracked clay puzzles. You arrive in the city of Tadmeka as a scribe for hire, parchment tucked into your robes, dreams of gold in your chest. The camel caravan left you coated in dust, your lips tasting of salt and sun. But the sight ahead steals your breath. A city made not of stone, but earth, moulded like sculpture, its walls smoothed by wind, its towers rising like prayers from the sand. Merchants call in 6 languages. A woman with brass bangles balances dyed leather on her head. And the gold, it's not myth. It glitters from belt buckles, eyelids, even the child running barefoot past you with a nugget clasped like a toy. You are assigned quarters near the mosque, a smooth adobe structure that leans ever so slightly westward, as if bowing. The imam greets you with a nod, but no smile. You are here to copy a record, an ancient text kept by his grandfather before him. It is wrapped in goat hide, brittle with age. At night, by oil lamp, you trace the faded letters, preserving tales of kings and floods and the laws of market trade. You learn that Tadmeka once sat beside a thriving river. It was not always a place of thirst. But each morning, sand creeps closer to the threshold. Wind howls through alleys like a warning. You see men reinforce rooftops, children fetch water from deeper wells, and traders mutter of roads lost beneath shifting dunes. A foreign merchant claims a city to the east has vanished entirely. The imam shakes his head. God buries what men forget. You start to believe the sand watches. One evening, you wake to find the edge of your mat submerged in it. No windows open, no draft, just dust, silent, uninvited.
The imam's daughter finds you staring at it and says, "It comes at night, when words fail. That is why we write." You keep writing. You write faster. The wind carries names and prayers, and you trap them in ink. One night, lightning cracks the sky like a curse. A single baobab tree catches fire outside the city wall. They say it hasn't rained in 2 years, but that night it rains ash, and in the grey morning a wall has fallen. You ask to leave. The imam refuses. You write until the last word. Then you may run, but not before. So you stay, and listen, and write, and the sand climbs higher.
The morning after the wall collapses, the wind is quieter, but the people are not. Voices carry across the market like banners, some blaming foreign traders for angering the spirits, others whispering that the imam has cursed the city with his stubborn silence. You head to the mosque, your scroll under one arm and doubt under the other. The imam greets you without speaking. He points to the crumbled edge of the compound, and you both look. A new dune, high as a house, presses against the outer stones. The children now play nearer to the mosque, as their usual paths have vanished. You hear one boy ask another, "Do walls fall when no one watches?" And the other shrugs, as if he's seen stranger things. That afternoon, 3 elders arrive from a village further west. Their faces are marked by sand, their robes heavy with dust. They carry warnings. Whole roads have vanished, oases have turned bitter, and caravans now disappear as if swallowed by the wind. One elder removes a small tablet wrapped in cloth and places it before the imam. It's a map, not drawn but etched, old and brittle. You lean closer. It shows cities, some crossed out, others surrounded by tiny circles of ink. One of those circles marks Tadmeka. You realize the ink circles are like tomb markers, warnings, not designations. The imam nods gravely. It is our turn. He does not elaborate, but you feel the weight of what he means. The scroll you've been copying now seems like a eulogy. That evening, as the sun spills its last heat across the clay walls, you notice the birds have gone. Not a single wing beat overhead. Even the goats are quiet, clustered together near the eastern well. Kala, the trader, stands at her stall longer than usual, not selling, not speaking, just watching the horizon, her eyes wet with memory. That night, you are visited by a boy no older than 10. He doesn't speak, just presses a clay charm into your palm and runs. The charm bears the same mark from the map. You stare at it for a long time. You do not sleep. You wake again and again to check if the charm has moved. Once you find it sitting upright. You're certain you left it flat. By morning, another building is gone, not toppled, but buried. The sand is not wind-blown, it is deliberate. Like something beneath the surface breathes upward. You write faster. You write the names of merchants, of bathhouse keepers, of every bricklayer you pass. You write down the price of bread, the names shouted at children, the shape of the moon that night. You are documenting a city mid-vanishing. One trader, an old woman named Kala, invites you to her tent. She shows you scrolls wrapped in dyed cloth, records of another city she once knew. This happened before, she says, in Aukar and in Wagadu. We thought they were tales to frighten children. Her voice is sandpaper, worn and wise. You ask what she did then. Ran. But she does not run this time. Her feet stay planted. Someone has to remember, she says, even when there's nothing left. You return to your quarters and feel it again, that silence before something breaks. The air is thick, the horizon is soft with dust. You light a candle, even though it is midday. The mosque bell no longer rings, and still the imam insists, "We are not finished." That evening, you help two men dig out a corner shop that's been half swallowed. They find jars of dried apricots, a broken scale, and a scroll bearing the name of a poet who vanished 10 years ago. "He used to sit here," one man says, "spoke only in riddles." You write his name down. That night, you write until your ink runs out. You chew bark to stay awake. The sand now seeps through the cracks in the roof. The imam's daughter braids her hair and sits beside you. She does not speak, only hums a lullaby you do not know. You ink more pages. You describe her hum, the shape of her braid, the sound of the sand in the corners of the room. And you dream again of cities that breathe sand instead of air. When you wake, the mosque is gone. The mosque did not collapse. It vanished. You wake with the dawn light stretching thin fingers across the adobe walls of your quarters, expecting to hear the familiar shuffle of the imam's sandals or the soft clang of the morning bell. But there is only wind, the kind that does not whistle but sighs, as though mourning. You step out into the open and see a bare patch of earth where the mosque once stood. The crescent finial, the leaning western wall, even the prayer rugs, they are all gone. Not buried, not broken. Gone. A new dune rests where the mosque had been, tall and unyielding, smooth asleep. People gather in stunned silence. No one weeps, no one speaks. The imam's daughter sits cross-legged near the dune, her braid unkempt, her hands folded in her lap. You do not ask her anything. You do not need to. She looks up at the sun and whispers something under her breath. You suspect it is a prayer or a goodbye. The city begins to shift again, not just in sand, but in spirit. Market stalls are abandoned, camels remain tethered and forgotten. Even the call to prayer, once defiant against the wind, falls quiet. Tedmecca feels like a breath being held too long. People begin to leave, some in silence, some muttering prayers, others shouting oaths at the sky. But not all leave. Some, like Kala, remain seated beside their homes, scrolls and stories clutched like shields. She says, "The wind eats truth if no one guards it." Her voice is thinner now, like the pages you write on. You are no longer writing history, you are writing survival. You make lists of those who remain. You sketch the positions of buried doorways and disappearing wells. You attempt to count the birds, but there are none. You chart the sun's angle at each hour. You trace the wind's movement by scattering seeds and watching how far they roll. It is a scientist's madness now, this chronicling, but you know that even madness can become scripture if preserved long enough. One morning, as you chew dried dates for breakfast, a stranger arrives. His skin is pale, his clothes foreign, and he carries no water. He kneels beside you in the shade and asks, not in greeting, but in confusion, "Is this the place they spoke of, the Golden City?" You want to laugh, but instead you nod. You say, "It was." He looks around and sees little more than wind-carved hills and whispers of dwellings. He asks if he may look through your records. You hesitate, but he kneels in the sand like a monk and waits, so you hand him a scroll. He reads it slowly. Then, with a scholar's hush, he says, "This must not be lost." He is the first person to say those words out loud. Together you begin copying, shoulder to shoulder, beneath a makeshift tent of woven reeds. Your hands cramp. The wind never ceases. The dune where the mosque once stood shifts slightly with each passing hour. At night, He tells you that his people back north speak of cities swallowed by trees, by water, by war, but never by the sky. You ask him if he will return home. He nods. In time. But you will forget, you say. No, he replies, because now you've made me a witness. You realize that is all you've been doing, making witnesses, that even if the sand takes the rest, the stories may still walk. One evening, you and Carla gather what remains of the market canopy and erect it atop the dune. She places dried herbs beneath it. You set your scrolls on a flat stone, held by pebbles. It looks absurd, like a shrine with no god. But people begin to gather, not to worship, but to remember. They tell their own stories now, of mothers who ground millet before the wells dried, of lovers who met by moonlight beside walls that no longer stand, of laughter and goats and the way sandalwood once lingered in the air. You write it all. You write until your fingers bleed. You write until someone builds a box for the scrolls. You write until the day the stranger leaves. He carries a copy of your scrolls in a waxed bundle beneath his cloak. He promises he will speak of Tadmeka wherever he finds an open ear. Carla gives him a strand of dyed beads. The Imam's daughter gives him silence. You give him your name. As he disappears into the desert, the wind swells again. A child shouts that the well has gone dry. Someone else says the goats have stopped bleating. You close your eyes. You do not panic. You pick up your pen, and you write one more line. Tadmeka.
It was early spring when your horse stumbled up the old path to the manor gates, hooves soaked from the muddy trails below Mount Ure. The message from the shogun had been brief. Go to the Nakamura estate. Record the inventory. Return. No escort, no further instructions. You wondered then why the estate's steward had not been summoned to Edo instead, but orders were not to be questioned. You tightened your cloak as the fog thickened. The manor emerged like a bruise against the pale mist, low-tiled roofs hunched under time and silence. A servant stood at the gate. He did not bow. "You are the scribe?" he asked. You nodded. The man turned without a word and began to walk. You followed. Inside, the corridors were long, dim and strangely clean. No dust, no smell of oil, no sound of footfall but your own. The walls were bare, no scrolls, no swords, no painted fans, just wood, pale, old, dry wood. At last, he led you to a small room, a futon, a low table, an inkset, a single candle. "You will not leave your room after dusk," he said, "no matter what you hear." You opened your mouth to question him, but he'd already bowed and slid the door shut. You sat down slowly. From somewhere deeper in the manor you heard a faint tapping, soft, irregular like fingers on a drum. That night you did not sleep. You rose at dawn to begin your work. A box of scrolls had been placed at your door. Inside were old tax records, rice inventories, harvest reports. But something was off. Each document stopped precisely 5 years ago. Nothing newer. And there were names, family names, including the daimyos, crossed out with thick red strokes. When you asked the servant, he bowed and said only, "Those families are no longer part of the record." The next day, you wandered a bit farther, past the kitchen, the storerooms, the well. The manor was too large for the few servants who remained. You passed empty wings, dustless but abandoned. Then you came to a hallway where the paper doors had all been sealed with strips of parchment, inked in kanji, warnings, charms. At the end of the hall was a door larger than the others, banded with iron. "That is the shrine," said a voice. You turned. It was the old gardener. He looked at the door, then at you. It was closed when the young master died. You should not be near it. You asked how he died. The gardener paused. He did not truly. That is why we stay, and why others do not. That night you heard footsteps outside your room, but when you opened the door, the corridor was empty. Only the faint smell of incense remained. Over the next few days you began to notice more changes. One by one the other servants became evasive. The cook no longer met your eyes. The steward answered your questions with vague nods. One morning the young maid who brought your meals stopped appearing altogether. Her name had also been on one of the scrolls. You asked the gardener again about the shrine. He held his rake tighter. It was once a place of honor, but grief changes things. It was built to protect the family. It became something else. He motioned you closer and whispered, "When the master's son died, it was sudden. They held the rites in that room, but something went wrong. The monk refused to finish the ceremony, said he saw the boy's mouth moving, said the child was praying backward." You laughed, unsure how to respond. The gardener did not. He pointed down the hall. Since then the house changed. The air got heavier. The shadows fell in the wrong direction. The birds stopped landing on the roof. You think we stay because we are loyal? We stay because no one else will. That night the tapping resumed, but this time it came from within your room. You looked toward the window. The shutters were closed. Still the tapping continued, slow and deliberate. Then it stopped. The candle you kept by your futon flickered violently. The flame bent, not from wind, but as if something had breathed on it. You turned. The door to your room was slightly open, and standing beyond it, backlit by the corridor's faint light, was the silhouette of a child. You stepped back, but as you did, the door slowly shut again, without a sound. You stayed awake until dawn. The next day you told the steward what had happened. He said nothing, only handed you another scroll. The name on it was your own. On the 5th day, a package arrived for you. No one admitted delivering it. Inside was a letter in unfamiliar handwriting. The seal was broken. It read, "They never closed the door in time. The shrine was meant to bind, not bury. If you see him, do not speak. Do not bow. Do not follow." There was no signature. You showed the letter to the steward. He took it, read it silently, then held it over a candle. As it burned, he said, "It would be best if you complete your work quickly." But that night, the paper door to your room slid open on its own. You froze. A boy stood there, barefoot, in an old kimono, hair hanging down. His eyes were closed. He smiled slowly. Then he bowed. You did not move. You did not speak. He stepped backward into the corridor and vanished. The next morning the steward placed 3 new scrolls outside your door. Each bore the name of a servant you had not seen, and each had a red mark across it. The garden turned to rot. Blossoms that had been pink and full the week before now drooped, blackened at the edges. The air smelled like copper and rain. The old gardener was gone. His tools were left behind, wet from dew. You found his gloves resting neatly atop the rake. That evening you passed by the shrine again. The door was still closed, but the seals, charms you had seen inked with sacred kanji, were curling at the corners, brittle and half-peeled. The next letter arrived without warning. This time it was slid beneath your door in the middle of the night. You had heard nothing. Do not write anything in ink. Do not seal scrolls after sunset. The spirit reads backwards. He thinks if you record his name, he will be alive again. The curse needs your hand to finish. Your hand trembled. By now the corridors grew darker even in daytime. The paper walls let in no light. The candles burned low and fast. You carried yours from room to room, no longer trusting the light that came from the windows. One afternoon you returned to your room and found the ink pot empty. A smear of red had been drawn across the table, 2 horizontal lines and a third vertical stroke. It looked like a kanji, but incomplete. That night the boy returned. This time his eyes were open, ash grey, not entirely human. He walked up to your futon and sat. You could not move, could not breathe. He looked at you for a long time. Then he placed a scroll in your hand. It bore your name. You opened it. It was blank, but your signature was already there. You stopped counting the days. Sleep came in short, breathless spells. Meals no longer arrived. The only sound left in the manor was the scraping of your brush and the occasional rustle beyond the walls. Your scrolls piled up with names of the dead, dates that made no sense, and one recurring note: not buried, bound. When you next passed the shrine corridor, the seals had fallen completely. The door stood ajar. A warm draught rolled out from within, tinged with incense and old rot. Something had changed. You did not mean to step closer, but your feet moved as if guided. Inside was darkness, not empty, but thick. A scent of charred paper and iron hung in the air. On the far wall, something had been painted. A symbol, large and red, like the one on your desk. It pulsed slightly, as though still bleeding. Beneath it lay a lacquer box. It had no lock. Your hand reached for it without thought. The lid creaked open slowly. Inside was a braid of hair, still tied with the red silk cord used in ceremonial rites. The strands were black, fine and warm, as if just cut. Beneath it a bone, too small for a man, too old for a child. A tiny pin was tucked beneath the bone, an imperial hair ornament, cracked through the middle. You turned and saw the boy in the doorway. He no longer looked quite like a boy. His eyes were the color of river silt, and his shadow bent in the wrong direction. This time he spoke. "Write it." You could not refuse. Even your breath obeyed. He led you to your room in silence. You sat before the parchment. The brush moved. His name appeared, though you never learned it. But your hand knew. Each stroke was smooth and final, as if you were not writing, but releasing something. As you finished the final stroke, he smiled and vanished. But the paper remained damp. You stared at it. The symbols were now inverted, a mirror of what you'd written. And then you noticed the ink pot was dry. The scroll had taken more than ink. The next morning the steward reappeared. "You must leave now," he said. "But the curse is tied to the act, not the place. If you stay, you continue it." You gathered your few belongings. The manor was silent. The doors stood open, but the air no longer stirred. The shrine door was sealed again, this time from the inside. You crossed the threshold. Your horse waited. You rode. The mist closed behind you like a door. The road twisted more than you remembered. The manor shrank behind you into the mist. And then was gone. But you did not feel free. For when you reached Edo, your satchel was heavier. Inside, the braid of hair, the scroll, and the ink pot, still wet. That night, you heard paper rustling in the dark. You avoided sleep for days after returning to Edo. The city bustled as if the world had never changed, but you walked through it like a shadow. No one in the records office asked where you had been. No one asked why you hadn't completed your inventory. And no one accepted the scrolls you tried to hand over. When you unrolled them yourself, you saw only one thing: your own name, written over and over, in handwriting that was not yours. You burned the first one. But in the morning it was back in your satchel, damp, smelling of ash. You found the steward's name on a temple registry, dead, 5 years ago. You searched the gardener's name. Nothing. The manor itself, burned to the ground in the winter before your visit, confirmed by 3 separate officials. Yet you had been there. You had seen them. You had written. One night you awoke to find a new scroll at your bedside. This one bore a different name, a child's name. You remembered it from the faded kanji in the shrine. The ink on the scroll pulsed. It bled through your fingers. You tried to throw it away, but your hand would not open. For days you did not write. Not letters, not reports, not even your own name. You feared what might come through. But eventually, your brush moved again, and once it did, you could not stop. More names appeared, names you didn't know, names that felt like they belonged to people you had never met and yet remembered. Some were Japanese, some were not. Then came the dreams. The boy stood in the shrine room, holding out his scroll. Behind him, the doors of the manor opened onto a river of ink, silent, endless. You awoke with a symbol drawn on your wall, the same red strokes from the lacquer box. Your ink pot sat open, empty. You left Edo that year, travelled east, tried to forget. But every spring since, a scroll arrives, wrapped in red silk, blank, until you touch it. Then it begins to write itself. You keep them all. Some say curses pass in stories, others say they live in names. You no longer speak yours aloud, for fear the boy will answer. You were not expecting explosions before breakfast, yet there it was, an echoing boom at precisely 6 o'clock in the morning that sent pigeons flapping off roofs and your cat diving under the bed. You staggered to the window in your nightshirt, heart pounding, and saw smoke curling up from the home of Monsieur Duclair. the retired watchmaker who had moved in 3 weeks earlier with 17 crates and a peculiar twinkle in his eye. At first, you assumed he'd simply dropped a heavy candelabrum or perhaps knocked over a fireplace poker. But when the next blast came at 7 o'clock sharp, and again at 8, you realized this was no accident. This was a schedule.
Monsieur Duclair was building something, and whatever it was, it had the regularity of a grandfather clock and the temperament of a battlefield. You walked over after the noon detonation to inquire, and he met you at the gate, soot on his face, goggles perched like a bird upon his forehead. "Ah, you are awake," he said cheerily, as if he had not just made a cannon his neighbour. "It works, non?" He gestured proudly toward a metal contraption bolted onto his courtyard wall. Part bell, part barrel, and very much something that should not be lit with a match indoors. "I have solved the problem of oversleeping," he declared. "Now the cannon greets the hour. Precision but with enthusiasm." You tried to protest, but he was already winding a new coil and muttering about the heroism of horology. Over the next few days, your home life became a symphony of rattled teacups, fallen paintings, and startled guests. Children began showing up to watch from the hedges. At least one local artist claimed the vibrations helped him feel time on a cellular level. But for the elderly widow 2 doors down, it meant daily heart palpitations, and once, the loss of her prized bonsai. By week 2, you were beginning to fantasize about moving to the countryside. The mayor visited. Duclair demonstrated. The cannon fired precisely at 3. The mayor spilled his tea. "This," he said, blinking soot from his lashes, "is both marvellous and a municipal hazard." Duclair beamed, mistaking it for praise. The townsfolk were split, half impressed, half sleep-deprived, and all with ringing ears. The church bell ringer filed a formal complaint, noting that his role had been usurped by a barrel with attitude. The blacksmith offered to reinforce it. The innkeeper offered to buy it. The baker, however, threatened to throw baguettes. Duclair was unmoved. "It is progress," he cried, strapping a second barrel to the first. Now the cannon clock chimed not just on the hour, but on the half. By then you had taken to sleeping in your cellar, wrapped in a feather duvet, and plotting revolution. You drafted a petition, 34 signatures, including one from a chicken. The town council met and argued for hours. Meanwhile, Duclair, oblivious to all, was modifying the fuse length for added flair. Then came the moment of reckoning, midnight. The townspeople stood outside his gate, candles in hand, eyes bloodshot. The cannon began to glow. Duclair emerged in his dressing robe, holding a stopwatch. "Tonight," he announced, "we achieve the perfect alarm." You muttered prayers. The clock ticked. The fuse sparked. And with a thunderous crack, the entire mechanism launched into the air, did a perfect arc, and landed in the duck pond. Silence. Steam rose. A duck quacked in protest. Duclair blinked. "Ah," he said softly. "Perhaps a tad enthusiastic." The widow fainted. The baker cheered. The mayor quietly lit a cigar. No one spoke of jail. But the cannon clock was gently dismantled the next morning and repurposed into a town sundial. It has not fired since. The ducks, however, still scatter at noon. As for you, you now keep time by the church bell again, gentle, distant, and gloriously non-combustible. Duclair has moved on to inventing a self-watering teapot. You remain suspicious. But in the quiet that returned to your street, you began to miss the thrill. Just a little, and every now and then when the breeze is just right, you think you hear it. Tick, tick, boom!
You were awakened before the sun by the heavy slap of sandals in the hallway. A voice hissed your name through the slatted screen, the steward's assistant, already sweating in the spring heat. You swung your legs over the mat and blinked into the gloom. "He drank too much ginger wine again," the assistant whispered. "You'll need the pail." This was not your first time, but it was your least favorite duty, collecting the emperor's urine. Not just for disposal, no, that would be simple. This was analysis, examination, ceremony. The emperor of the Great Ming believed his health, his power, and perhaps even the future of the dynasty could be seen in the golden trail he left each morning in his chamber pot. And as one of the lesser palace servants, it had become your unenviable role to carry the vessel, observe its contents, and report the findings to the chief physician. You tied your sash, grabbed the lacquered pail, and followed the assistant past silent scrolls and flickering lanterns. Outside the imperial bedchamber, 2 guards stood like statues. One gave a nod, the other turned away. You stepped in? The scent was sharp, familiar, cloying. The pot sat on a low wooden stand, steam rising faintly from its rim. You bowed toward the sleeping form behind the gauze curtain, lifted the chamber pot with both hands, and backed out like a priest exiting a shrine. In the courtyard, the physician waited, robes pressed and expression unreadable. "Set it here," he murmured, gesturing to a lacquered tray lined with rice paper. Then came the rituals. First, a thin reed was dipped to gauge viscosity. Next, color compared to painted tiles. Was it more amber or pale like morning tea? Then the smell, which the physician assessed with a practiced sniff and a slight nod. He made notes with a brush. Day 6. Slightly sour. Hydration adequate. Constitution uncertain. You stood in silence. Behind you the pail steamed. "You may go," the physician said. You bowed. Your stomach rumbled, but you had no appetite. By mid-morning the emperor was in the garden, composing poems about cranes. You scrubbed the pail beside the fish pond. A koi watched with mild disapproval. The older servant said there had once been a servant who spilled the pot near the pavilion of fragrant scholars. He had been reassigned to the stables. Worse, some whispered of a eunuch in the Wanli reign who dared to alter the urine report, added a drop of honey to suggest improved vitality. He was never seen again. You learned quickly. Do not interpret. Do not suggest. Simply observe. Describe. Obey. One afternoon you were summoned to the Hall of Perfect Contemplation. A new physician had arrived from Suzhou, and he had ideas. "What if," he whispered, eyes gleaming, "the Emperor's essence contains not just signs of health, but messages from heaven? What if we boil it, distill it?" You blinked. "Boil it, master?" "Yes. Steam holds memory. Perhaps in vapor we shall glimpse divine patterns." Thus began the great experiment. A bronze kettle was commissioned. Incense was added to the fire to soothe the vapors. You stood with fan in hand, stirring the air as golden mist curled toward the rafters. Once a court poet wandered through and began writing a verse about the warmth of imperial fragrance. You began to question your career path. After 10 days, the results were inconclusive. The new physician departed. The old one returned, unimpressed. The kettle was quietly turned into a vessel for lotus tea. Still, the rituals continued. You came to know the emperor's diet intimately. When he ate too many lychees, the color changed. When he fasted, it was thin as water. Once, after a diplomatic feast, it glowed faintly pink. He had mistaken plum syrup for wine. You logged it all. One dawn, as you carried the pot through the southern cloister, you slipped. Just a moment, but enough. A slosh, a stain, a gasp from the steward behind you. "Say nothing," you whispered. "You must cleanse yourself," he replied. You did, with rose water and regret, and yet the emperor never noticed. Or if he did, he never said. Perhaps he too was tired of the ritual. That day he drank only hot water. The urine was clear. The following week, the emperor addressed the court. He was strong, sharp. He spoke of calendars and comets, of governance and grain. His voice was firm. The physician nodded at you subtly. Your reports had foretold nothing, and yet all was well. That night, as you sat beneath the peach trees with a bowl of rice and cabbage, another servant asked what it was like to carry such a private burden. You said nothing, but in your heart you knew. It was strange. It was sacred. It was ridiculous. It was imperial China. And tomorrow you would carry the pail again. You woke to silence. No summons, no urgent whisper, no clattering footsteps, just the low hum of cicadas beyond the shutters and a vague, unsettling calm. You waited, dressed, and waited more. Still no word. This had never happened. By now you would have made the first delivery to the courtyard basin, but instead you stood at your doorway, bucket in hand, waiting for a ritual that had not begun. The steward appeared, eyes narrowed. "He's meditating," he muttered. "Says he must not expel anything until he receives a sign from heaven. No urine, no sweat, no breath wasted. His will is concentrated." The chief physician was not amused. He paced under the plum tree, muttering about balance and the perils of restraint. "If qi does not flow, the body swells like a gourd," he grumbled. "He will become his own pressure cooker." By midday, the emperor still had not emerged. Court officials loitered in shaded halls. Musicians played softly to no one. The royal dogs slept in a pile. You, meanwhile, were told to remain nearby, pail at the ready. "Should he change his mind?" the steward warned. "You must be there before the stream begins." Hours passed. A storm gathered beyond the northern hills. Inside it was still. A maid confessed she had heard him muttering. Something about dreams, dragons in wells, the ghost of a eunuch beneath the bed. You blinked. You wondered if you too were beginning to go mad. By dusk the palace felt like it held its breath. Candles flickered uneasily. Even the koi seemed reluctant to surface. You sat beside the empty basin, now cool to the touch. You stared at your reflection in the water. Did the emperor's bladder govern the kingdom's balance? Could peace be measured in withheld streams? And then a shuffle, a groan, a shadow behind the paper screen. The door creaked open. The emperor emerged, hair uncombed, eyes distant. "The sign has come," he said simply. He walked, no, glided toward the garden. You followed, everyone did. He stood beneath the moon, disrobed with casual dignity, and finally relieved himself into the sacred pot. You caught every drop. Steam rose like incense. The physician collapsed with relief. The next morning the emperor summoned the scribes. He dictated a new edict. "All servants shall be trained in the quiet patience of readiness. All bodies are instruments of harmony. Even waste may wait upon wisdom." The edict was copied and posted. You read it twice, laughed once, and resumed your place the following dawn. Pail in hand, breath held, listening not for footsteps, but for the subtle wisdom of bladders.